everybody, welcome to No Plan, No Problem, a weekly D&D advice podcast where two Dungeon Masters go on an epic quest to find 3 actionable tips for you to use in your next game. I'm your Dungeon Master Anto.
And I would like to rage, Matthew Perkins.
You can find my stuff across the internet at icarus-games.co.uk.
And you can find my stuff over at matthewperkins.net. Anto, what are we talking about today?
So today, we're going to be talking about Barbarians. Bar. Those ragey boys, Barbarians. Barbarians are one of the base classes in D&D. They are a martial class, so the majority of their focus is fighting and doing big fights, and they are kind of categorized and classified by their rage mechanic, which lets them get really, really angry and get a whole bunch of extra special features because they're so angry.
That's right, Barbarians. So today we're going to find 3 tips about Barbarians, and the adventurer helping us with our first tip is named McHughy Unleashed from the Reddit, which is called 3D6. McHughy says, "Can somebody here help me build a barbarian that can still be useful to the team, but not get stuck in the barbarian stereotype of I rage and attack, and not being useful in conversation due to poor charisma?" So it sounds like this person wants to play against type, Anto.
Yes.
So my first question for you would be, what is the type that they're playing against? What's the stereotype?
So I think the stereotype for a barbarian is big, strong, and dumb. So typically you have your barbarian will be a large, strong character who dumps their intelligence and charisma stats. So they're not very smart and they're not very charismatic, and all they do is run up to things and hit them very hard until they die. Yeah.
And I'd say even like the typical barbarian, the stereotypical barbarian, is really primal and tribal in nature.
Yes.
Like I could picture the barbarian stereotype wearing like a wolf pelt and maybe like a bear skull, like a real kind of I don't want to say primitive, but definitely a tribal kind of feeling to them, which, you know, gets kind of old. Conan the Barbarian. Hey, it's right there in the name, buddy.
Exactly.
You got the branding spot on.
But I think that's actually a really good place to start with Conan, because a lot of people will think of Conan as the typical barbarian, but then they don't play exactly like Conan. I think that Conan isn't an unintelligent or uncharismatic character. He gathers together a group of friends to go on this quest. They solve problems. Yeah, a lot of the time using their swords, but they have to think about how they're going to use their swords at least. I don't think Conan is quite as dumb and brutish as a lot of people play the stereotypical barbarian.
But he is uncivilized, right?
Yeah. Yes.
A lot of the time, people will conflate intelligence and the way somebody relates to civilization.
Yeah.
Hey, I just want to touch on this real quick. It is wild to me that Conan has to go by Conan the Barbarian.
Yes.
Like, Conan O'Brien is not more famous than Conan the Barbarian. I think it should be Conan and then Conan the talk show host.
Yes. I mean,
this is BS.
I think that it plays into what you said about kind of civilization and people outside of civilization, because he is Conan the Barbarian because to his enemies, his defining feature is his otherness from civilization. He is the barbarian. So when they use Conan the Barbarian, they are already putting a bias against him in conversation because they're framing him as existing only as this barbarian.
I recall from like year 8, social studies or whatever, that I think like the word barbarian is meant, it comes from like Romans or something, and they would say that anybody that wasn't Roman was a barbarian.
Yeah.
So it is specifically a word meant to describe somebody's relation to society. So you're totally correct. Like maybe that's why they have that stereotype.
Yeah, I think that
of being uncultured.
It definitely plays into that, and I think that if you want to play against type, which it seems as if McHughy Unleashed wants to do, the place to start is kind of with that barbarian outside of the class, the barbarian personality and the level of civility, if that is even a thing.
I reckon we can do this. Well, let's kind of take away those things that make the stereotypical barbarian what they are, and then just see the shape of the character that we're left with. So the stereotypical barbarian wears pelts. So let's say that this barbarian actually wears really fine clothes. They're actually a fashionista.
We can take away their kind of barbarous mannerisms and instead make them much more eloquent and at least as well spoken as the average person, because one thing I think that a lot of players forget is that 10 is the baseline. 10 is your average person's level of ability. So if they put their 8 into charisma, that doesn't mean that they are completely inept in social situations. It just means they're a little bit less capable than the average person, but probably not so much that anyone would really notice.
Yeah. So, okay. So they're a little bit eloquent, like they speak well, they dress well. What about this? What if they're kind? You know, barbarians are like typically they have such, their attacks are all like rage, savage, critical, brutal, something or whatever. What if this person's actually really kind and the barbarian word just kind of describes their fighting nature? Like they're not a barbarian in that they're barbarish. They're a barbarian in the fact that when they fight like a brute.
Yes.
Maybe they're just big. Maybe that's it.
I think that is a really good way to play a barbarian. And I've run a game in which had a barbarian like that, and it was a super interesting character.
So they were kind of like a good-natured, kind, eloquent person who just got their rage on.
Yeah. He even had like a fine little tuxedo. He was a little frogman, so it makes the fact that he was a barbarian that much funnier. But he had a fine little tuxedo that he would wear, and then in battle he was just clad in like heavy armor and just swung 2 huge swords around.
Hey, why does rage even have to describe anger? I know that it's called rage, but like there are plenty of characters in popular media that go into air quote rages without being angry. Like in there's heaps of animes and stuff where like the ninja anime boy goes into his like focus state and he's not screaming or anything. It's just like, no, this is my tranquil space. You could have a tranquil rage and it's just a space where you take less damage and you strike more precisely. I think you don't have to be characterized by anger. My
favorite example of that is probably Goku from Dragon Ball Z. You know, to power up,
he does yell a lot.
They stand there and scream. But most of the time when Goku's like Super Saiyan, so like in his rage, he as a person and his personality isn't angry and rageful. He's still quite playful. He's still quite calm and in control of his emotion.
That's a really good point because at his most powerful, he is calm. Like, welcome to our Dragon Ball Z podcast.
I want to play all my barbarians as Dragon Ball Z fighters from now on because I think that is a really apt description of how I view the rage mechanic. It's drawing on that kind of primal rage to get yourself pumped, but you're not existing in that space. You're using it to get yourself to a place of higher power, and then once you're there, you are fully in control of your emotions and your energy, and you're not just this mindless creature.
And sometimes you even unlock value, intrinsic value, from just arbitrarily, subverting the type, right? Just then when we were talking about, what can we take away from the barbarian? Like, just by doing that stupid little exercise, we started to paint a character. And I bet if we went further with it, we would find something that would be fun to play. I'd suggest that this person whose name I'd forgotten and I couldn't pronounce in the first place, I'd suggest that it is okay just to arbitrarily play against type. You don't need a reason. You don't need any logic behind it either.
I think that for barbarians specifically, the thing that I would take away to play against the stereotype of I rage and attack is conversation. And play your barbarian as more of a conversationalist. Actually engage in the conversation more rather than just being like, I'm a barbarian, I'm going to stand back, I'm not going to say anything, I'll grunt maybe a few times during the conversation. Engage in the social situations. You don't have to be a charisma 18 character to engage with another humanoid creature in a conversation.
In Critical Role, in the first season of Critical Role, they had a barbarian on the team played by Travis. His name was Grog. My name is Grog and I like ale. That kind of character. And I could actually see, I watched the whole season for some reason. I had a lot of time, not a lot of hobbies, not a lot of podcasts that I was making back then. I could see Travis, the player, actually getting frustrated by the limitations of his character.
Yeah.
At times, he had fun in that little play pool, playing with that character. Mm-hmm. But at other times, you could see he had a great idea, but he knew that he couldn't get his character to express it in a way that he would be happy with or would make sense to him.
Yeah.
And so he was continually making bad decisions.
Yeah.
Strategically. But he was trapped in the barbarian casing, you know?
Yeah. I think that it's a weird head state that players get into, I feel, because when you have a negative modifier, go into mechanics for a second, when you have a negative modifier, it feels as if players feel like they have to play to that modifier all the time. So if you've got an 8 in your charisma, you have to play yourself as uncharismatic. But how many characters out there, how many players have level 18 or level 20 intelligence wizards, and the player is not that intelligent, but we all as a collective are perfectly okay with them playing a character vastly different to how it should be if they were that intelligent? So why would we have a problem with a barbarian being more charismatic than it might suggest on their sheet when we don't have a problem with the wizard clearly not being as intelligent as it is on their sheet?
I like that a lot, and I think I can distill it into a tip. I think the tip should be something like, when you look at your ability scores, take them as a guide, not as the rule, you know? Just because when you play a barbarian, it says, according to the rules, you're going to want to have a high strength. Does that mean that your character has to be completely muscle-bound and massive? No, you can play a slender character with a high strength. It's fine.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip. So, should we roll for sponsors?
Let's roll for sponsors. Today's sponsor is Anto from Icarus Games. Now, Anto runs a YouTube channel with some great resources on there. You can check out Anto's channel to get some great map-making guides, D&D tips, and he's got the DM Bible. He has the best OneNote resource going out there today. And even beyond that, hey, I'm so glad to have Anto as a friend. Such a great guy. I'm really glad he's on this podcast with me. I asked him to take off his headphones while I said all this. Ha ha ha. He's not going to hear this until the episode goes live. I love you, buddy. Thank you. So go subscribe to him.
Well, I hope that Matt had kind things to say and he wasn't talking about all those times I've done terrible things. If you enjoy this podcast, you can find us all across the internet at No Plan, No Problem. We really appreciate all the follows and the likes. And if you're on iTunes, those 5-star reviews, they really help us out. And if you want to support us even more, you can find us over on Patreon, where you'll get access to exclusive pre-shows, as well as a whole bunch of extra game materials that we've made to go along with these shows. Thanks. We love you.
Oh, okay. So what's our breakout segment this time? What are we doing?
So today we're going to look at an RPG horror story and get all spoopy. This comes from Snorkel on...
Sorry, who? Sorry, who was it? Who was it from?
That's a brilliant name, because when I... It's Dixnorkel.
Do what you got to do.
It's fine. I got this. So this story comes from Snorkel over on RPG Horror Stories, and it's titled The Tale of the Barbarian Who Didn't Understand D&D. And they say, so I started...
Okay, I'm ready.
They say, so I started a campaign with some first-timer friends to help them get a feel for D&D. Nothing too complicated, but we have some really deep characters. A half-elf sorcerer, a halfling cleric, other really deep characters. They've been traveling around the world with a little mechanical helper who levels up after every story milestone, freeing the mechanisms that maintain the balance in the world from the evil wizard who secretly pulls the strings.
Classic stuff.
Last session, they reached a particularly tough fight with a beholder over a wand that has 3 charges of the wish spell and changes your alignment to lawful good. The barbarian was the first to take interest in it, and he grabbed it during the fight. He was the first timer, so I explained that the wish spell is exactly what it sounds like, and the item would only have 3 charges, after which it's completely mundane.
Mm-hmm.
The entire group recognises the importance of the situation and potentially applying the wishes to the main storyline and progression and doing all those good things, except the barbarian, of course, who wishes that he was flying towards the beholder.
Okay, well,
His character moves about 40 feet up, and he gets one attack on the beholder, misses, and then flies past it to the floor. I was so flummoxed by the stupidity of the wish that I told him he didn't have to calculate fall damage. I just allowed him to continue his arc and descend onto the ground gracefully. At this point, the rest of the table is in complete uproar, and people are telling the Barbarian that in and out of game, this was a stupid decision. And they're super upset with him. He spends the rest of the session completely angry about this in character, instantly gets charmed on the next turn, and then forgets that he can frenzy out of it, so spends the rest of the fight incapacitated.
Wait a minute. Am I meant to sympathize with the party and say, look, this is such a crap barbarian? This sounds like a crap group.
Yeah.
The barbarian is fine.
Yeah, I mean...
Who's the bad? Does the story want the barbarian to be the bad guy here?
Yes, I think the story wants the barbarian to be the bad guy.
Okay, no, we stand the barbarian. Is there any more?
Yeah.
Okay, hit me.
So during the next session, the barbarian splits off from the group. He decides he's got his own ideas, refuses to take input from the rest of the group, and he disguises himself as a local and then goes to the tavern to drink and look for a suitable vessel. At the end of the session, he gets on a ship and just leaves and says he's going to find his own adventure and find his own way in the world. So the DM says, fine, that's fine. And the barbarian starts rolling up a new character right there and there at the table.
Dude, that is actually a baller move.
Yeah, that is a real power move to be like, oh, everybody's angry at me because I did this thing. Well, I guess I'll go play alone then.
That's so cool. Hey, yeah, screw you guys.
Like,
I'm going home. Is there any more? Is that it?
No, I think that'd be it. He makes a new character and leaves.
All right, I'm ready to rage about this.
Yeah,
I'm angry.
I mean...
And I'm angry at that dungeon master and that group. They did that barbarian dirty.
You think so? Well, go on. Tell me why they did that.
Okay.
The barbarian dirty.
So, for one, they put a loaded gun, aka a wand of wishes, on the battlefield, and then got mad at him when he used it.
Yeah.
Like, that's such... If you put something out there, you want the players to engage with it, and then you punish them for engaging with it. So he says, I want to fly towards the beholder. So you just decide to take that 100% literally and let him waste the wish. You could have said, okay, cool. The barbarian now has flight permanently. Yeah. That's cool, you know?
Yeah, that gets into one of my problems with the wish spell. I think that too many dungeon masters use it as an excuse to screw their players over.
Amen. Because it's... People look at wish and they go, oh, okay, I can't let my players get exactly what they want. I have to be an adversarial knob about it. I have to be super gaslighty and crap about this great fun thing that I'm giving my players. I wouldn't want them to enjoy themselves.
No, I think it's okay to say to them, right, I want you to be very explicit in your wish. I want you to give me exact wording because there is a potential that this might go awry, and have them, write out their wish before they cast it, sort of thing. But to take what they say in the moment without giving them any kind of forewarning or explanation or anything like that, and just immediately twist it and be like, okay, you're going to get yeeted through the air at this beholder and then you'll land fine. And that's a wish gone.
But even then, even if they make a mistake and they make a crap wish, still don't punish them for engaging with the plot device that you've put in front of them. Yeah. They are playing your game. You've put something out there and they've gone, yeah, okay, yeah, I'll pick that up. Thank you. And then you go, oh, no. Yeah. Oh, you did it wrong.
I think that...
Okay, did it even say it was a first-time player?
Yeah, it was. The barbarian was a first-time player.
I'm raging.
How very barbarian of you.
Yeah, that's me.
I think that from the other player's point of view, I understand being kind of frustrated that someone picks up a wand of wish and wastes the wish spell. But to me, there are two avenues of like juice that come from wish. You wish for something and get exactly what you want, and getting that means that you get juice. Or you wish for something and there are complications, and the complications are inherently juicy.
Yes.
Either of those is fine, and in that circumstance, the barbarian wasting one of those charges of wish introduces new juice because they've got one fewer wish that they can use for other things now, which is going to create new drama and new things that will or will not happen, and that's all great fuel for role-playing.
This Dungeon Master has introduced a negative juice coefficient to their RPG concoction.
Yeah.
Okay, there is now a space, an empty space, where juice should be, because with your wish, you want interesting consequences or you want interesting rewards. And also, look, hey, I'm not going to let this go. I am not going to let this go. I'm going to rewrite this horror story in my head from the Barbarians' perspective, because this is actually the Barbarians' horror story.
Yeah.
I joined a new group with my friends. I was really excited to play. I found a cool magic item, and when I used it, all of my friends got angry at me and my character. And then I decided to leave.
Yeah.
That's the horror story.
That when you frame it like that, it is... No, I think I'm on board with it. I think that the Barbarian is not the bad guy that this horror story paints them out to be, because especially being a new player, as a Dungeon Master, you can sit there in the moment, in the middle of a combat, and say, right, okay, this is a wand of wish. Here's what wish does. It's got 3 charges, go. But the Barbarian doesn't have the wider context for that. They've only got the description that you've just given them, which probably isn't enough for them to fully understand the gravity of this situation. So...
But even then, what if the Barbarian, like, I imagine if you say a wish, you can wish for anything. The Barbarian wished for something that they thought was super cool.
Yeah. You know, it's...
They probably thought, like, I'm doing something really cool, and then nobody else thought it was cool. They got angry at him for it.
By the description here, the beholder was up in the air, and the Barbarian wanted to fly up to them. So the Barbarian got this magical tool, and thought, right, I want to use this to further the goals of the party. We're fighting this beholder. I want to get up there where I am most effective, and I'll fly up to him.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, it does become the onus of the problem does fall to the Dungeon Master for being like, right, okay, I'm just going to yeet you through the air like a catapult, rather than giving you the fly spell and allowing you to fly up there like a gosh darn hero and swing your giant weapon at the beholder.
Yeah, I guess like maybe a recourse for this Dungeon Master, except not doing what they did. Okay, I can't be too angry. They might hear this. They could have asked, "Hey, Barbarian, what's your intention?"
Yeah.
When you say you want to fly at the beholder, what's your intention? And the Barbarian would say, "I want to be able to get into melee range of the beholder."
Yeah.
And the DM could then interpret that a little bit better and say, "Okay, now you can fly," or maybe now you're a giant and you can reach it.
Yeah.
Or maybe now the beholder can't fly. Just something that would be useful.
Yeah. I think that anytime, at least how I handle it, anytime the players are going to either do something themselves or I'm going to do something to them that has the chance for kind of these negative consequences that might be quite big consequences, I do like to iron out their intention or make sure they fully understand the weight of what they're doing or fully understand what I'm saying to them. So if that means getting a bit meta and straight up saying, right, if you say that you want to fly towards this beholder, you're going to get thrown through the air. Is that what you want? You know, this is a first-time player. This is the first wish that they have ever used, and it did nothing. They got thrown through the air, they missed their attack, and they just landed on the ground.
Yeah, man.
And that's their first experience of one of the most powerful spells in the entire game.
I mean, wishes are the kind of thing that D&D players will talk your ear off about.
Yeah.
They're like, oh no, we had this wish, and I wish to have like a horse, and we got like this golden Pegasus. It was crazy, you know? And like this Dungeon Master just took that story away from that player and from that group.
Yeah.
By being so literal.
Like, I started this being like, oh yeah, this is a horror story, stupid barbarian. But now I'm fully on board with you. I'm in full rage mode at this DM. Like when I compare, thinking of it from the Barbarians' point of view and thinking about that being their first wish and comparing that to the kind of wishes that I've deployed in my game and seeing the things that my players have done with wish versus that being the first thing they've ever done fills me with just such an immense sense of sadness for that player.
Anto and Matt, patron saints of new players. I'm all for this.
Yeah.
I think the tip should be, we didn't cover this at all, but I think it is the tip. We've been kind of circling it. Don't put a wand of wishes or whatever on the table if you're going to get angry when the players use it. Like, why'd you put it there?
Yeah.
Don't be surprised. Enjoy it.
Only put things in your game that you expect the players to use.
Hey, Barbarian, we love you. All right, just one more tip to go. So the adventurer helping us with our third tip is named Richard the Banished. Hey, Richard, you are unbanished for this one. Richard comes from the D&D Beyond forums. It's just a short one, and they say, Barbarian out of rage? How bad is it really? So a rage has limited uses, Anto. I think you only get like 3 or 4, whatever, per long rest, and then later it becomes a short rest ability.
Mm-hmm.
But how bad is a barbarian with 0 rages?
Oh, I think that's a reasonable question to ask. I would say they are still very good without a rage.
They're still very good. Do you remember off the top of your head exactly what rage does? It's okay if you don't, I do. It's a rhetorical question. Can I say it?
Yeah.
Can I say it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to do it. Okay, I'm all big brain Perkins over here. So a rage increases the damage of each of your attacks that you do. It starts off at like +2 damage and then increases as you go up levels. It also halves the damage that you take from slashing, bludgeoning, and the other type of damage.
Piercing.
And depending on the different... depending on the subclass that you take, it also does other things. Like if you take a totem barbarian, then it halves all damage except psychic. Or if you take like there's one like an elemental kind of barbarian, it does kind of AoE damage around you. There's one kind of barbarian called the Zealot, which means like when you're raging, you can't die. If you go to 0 hit points, you just stay alive and keep fighting. So it's a pretty essential ability.
Yes.
But what is a barbarian without a rage?
I think that a barbarian without the rage can still cover one of the core functions of a party. So they can either still be the huge damage dealer, because even without the rage, they still have abilities that let them swing their weapons really, really hard. Mm-hmm. Or they can be the tank, because they've got the biggest hit dice, so they will usually have the most health. They also have really good armor properties, either unarmored or if they're wearing armor, they can be really tanky. So without the rage, they can still be a really key component of a fight.
But, okay, so the thing that they're missing from not having their rages. So like you're right, they do have the most health. They roll a d12 when they level up, and the next lowest is like a d10 on fighters or whatever. So they're always going to have the most health. But when they have rage and they're taking half damage, it's like their health is doubled, right? What they lose with their rage is they lose that feeling of invincibility. If I'm playing a barbarian, I don't mind going 1v1 against any creature.
Yeah.
I will literally fight any creature.
Which is kind of the one of the whole points of the barbarian. When you're in that rage, you do feel a level of invulnerability and like you can take on the world.
As a dungeon master, if I'm trying to like balance an encounter around a barbarian, and there's like if there's a barbarian on the player's side, then I know that if I put just one creature out there, like a boss, then the barbarian will melt that boss. Mm-hmm. Because as soon as they start raging, you go, okay, so that is the character that is dealing the most single target damage, right? They're 1-to-1, they're outputting the most damage. And also, they have the most health and they're the tankiest. So they're doing the most damage and I shouldn't be targeting them. So like the only way to kill a barbarian is to kill all their allies first.
The way to... I know that the person wasn't asking for how do you stop a barbarian, but for me, the way you stop a barbarian is through magic and through a variety of ability affecting magic. So you take away their toys.
You dazzle them. Be like, oh, check us out, there's magic, it's a rabbit. Hey, come on, I know you want to hit me, but seriously, you wouldn't hit a guy that has a rabbit in his hat, would you? You wouldn't do that. Please don't hit me.
You know, they have proficiency in strength and constitution saving throws, but they don't have anything in any of the mental saving throws. So they're pretty mentally vulnerable. So you just target them with your hold persons, your dominates, your sleep spells at early levels, you know, those kind of things that take them out of the fight. And
because they don't have any range.
No.
They don't have any range either. If you just stick them in place, they're not. What are they going to do? Throw an axe at you? Oh no! You know, no. You're going to come and walk over and pick it up, or you can't. Oh no!
That does get circumvented as they start to level up. You know, they get fast movement at level 5, which bumps up their speed a little bit. But like a barbarian is typically going to hit things with a melee weapon. So if your creature is elevated, if it's flying on a raised platform that they can't get to, if it's any way outside of the reach of their weapon, a barbarian is useless in a lot of cases.
You know, one thing that you've actually kind of triggered in my brain here is a realization that even though barbarians do have the most health and they are the tankiest, they're also the most likely to go down because of some decision. Like as a barbarian, I've crash tackled harpies off cliffs. I've jumped into lava.
Yeah.
You know, because I thought I've been invincible, I've done the stupidest stuff and gotten knocked out, and the wizard has to drag me out by the ankle.
Yeah.
Like if you don't have a rage, it just means that's still going to happen.
And one thing that 5th edition does that is a good thing for the player, but I'm not sure is necessarily a good thing for the juice, is in Pathfinder, when you rage, you gain a number of temporary hit points.
Oh.
When you leave your range, you lose those. So if you get knocked unconscious, as soon as you're knocked unconscious, you take a bunch of what is essentially damage, because these temporary HP, they're the last ones that go. So if you are knocked unconscious as a barbarian, your rage ends and you take an amount of damage. And at higher levels, that amount of damage, because it's a big number of temporary HP, will kill you. So if you get knocked out during your rage, you die.
I can imagine them loading him up into the ambulance, and the nurse is like, "We can't let him calm down. Keep slapping him.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep pissing him off."
And I always thought that was a really good balancing mechanic for the barbarian, because it plays off that sense that their power's coming from their rage, and it weaponizes it against them in a sense. It says, right, okay, you can go really hard and throw yourselves into these dangerous situations that you probably shouldn't do, but you need to make sure that if you throw yourself into a combat, you can finish that combat before you die.
Hey, do you always have this conversation with your barbarians where you go, okay, so that hits you, you take 20 damage, and then every hit they go, oh, do I take half of 20 damage, or is that already halved? And you go, oh, no, that's already halved. Or you go, oh, no, that's not halved. Do you do that every single time?
One of the benefits of playing online is that the VTT we use automates all that, so I don't have to worry about it. They just take the half damage.
Oh, okay, that's cool. Yeah, that doesn't happen to me every time. That doesn't annoy the hell out of me. I think like the answer to what is a barbarian without their rage, they are a very competent combatant.
Yeah.
Because let's compare a barbarian without rage to a fighter. Would that be fun?
Yeah, let's do it.
Because outside of a rage, let's imagine like a level 5 or so barbarian. You have your totemic path, but your primal path. But I think a lot of those abilities actually have to do with your rage.
Yeah.
So you'd still have your multi-attack. You would still have your critical ability if you're like playing a frenzy one where you do like extra crit damage or whatever. You still have with your reckless attack. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Reckless attack is actually kind of more symbolic of barbarian than rage, I think, because it's risk-reward mechanic every turn. Reckless attack, for those listening, is where you go, at the start of your turn, you go, I am going to attack recklessly, so you attack with advantage every attack that turn. However, until the start of your next turn, every attack against you has advantage. Yeah. It's scary.
Yeah, I think that reckless attack is probably the potentially more quintessentially barbarian than the rage, because it plays into that type of character that throws themselves into the fray regardless of the consequences.
Normally, the barbarian has so many hit points that the dungeon master doesn't want to target them down, right? You don't want to focus fire the tank. That doesn't make any sense. But what if the tank makes themselves vulnerable for a turn? Yeah. That might just be enough to make you go, well, maybe I can take him down. One
thing I like to do is, when you have a tanky character, I think a lot of dungeon masters think, right, there's no point in targeting the tanky character because it's a waste. I like to really go in for the tanky characters sometimes, and if I've got kind of a tentpole fight, something that's a big thematic, climactic piece, I like to target the tank character really hard at the start of the fight and waste some of the enemy's biggest things on him so that they get down to either really low HP or they have to burn up a lot of their abilities, because that makes all the other players poop their pants, because they're like, look at what it's doing to our biggest boy. What's it going to do to me wearing this fine silk wizard's robe?
Is the barbarian the quintessential melee fighter? Or is it the fighter, do you think, in 5th edition? Because I think the barbarian is the most melee character out there, the most martial.
I think that in terms of pure fighting, I'd go with Barbarian. I think that the fighter is weirdly more of a thinking man's fighter because they have more abilities that kind of play into training and strategy versus I'm going to hit that thing until it's not moving anymore.
Okay, hey, we're going to find a tip.
We do have to find a tip. We've gone so off tangent. I can't even remember what the person was asking.
Oh, the question exactly was, and I'm not looking at this up on my phone right now. I remember exactly what it is. I'm not trying to frantically unlock my phone and look. The question was
Barbarian without rage. How bad is it?
Oh, I guess it's not bad.
Yeah, not bad would be the answer. In terms of a tip, like the whole point of this show, I would say that it is. I don't know.
But maybe it's the strategy. Maybe it's like. Maybe the tip is just to be cognizant of the weaknesses and strengths of a barbarian. And so the strength of a barbarian is if you put a barbarian 1v1 against any creature, the barbarians, like, you could put money on that barbarian and there might be a shot. They can hold their own at least for a while. Yeah. And the opposite end of that coin is if you limit a barbarian's movement, then it will completely nerf them. If you hold person, they don't have a lot of mobility. They don't have a lot of ranged attacks. Yeah,
if you can do anything to restrain a barbarian, then they cease becoming an active threat. So what you're saying is the third tip is Michael Caine saying to Batman to know his limits.
Is that what Michael Caine says?
Yeah, he says, know your limits, Master Wayne.
I promised that I would roleplay a barbarian, Mr. Wayne, and I have. I have roleplayed a barbarian.
And I failed you.
Wait, is that where he cries?
Yeah. Crying Michael Caine.
Oh, Michael Caine. Oh, boo-hoo. Oh, you're Batman. Oh, I'm crying. Give me an Oscar.
Well, that was certainly a podcast.
It was certainly something.
We did it.
Yeah. Oh, hey, we got to do that thing where we sum up.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do it. So I'm going to... Hey, Anto, what are the tips?
Tip number 1 is to take your ability scores as a guide and not play exactly to what they say.
Okay.
Tip number 2 is don't put items in front of your group if you don't want them to use them.
Yes, wand of wishes, huh? Huh? Yeah.
And tip 3 is to know your limits, Master Wayne.
I'm crying, Master Wayne. I'm sorry. Hey, that's the end of the podcast. We did a great job. Hey, my name's Matthew Perkins. You can find my stuff over at matthewperkins.net.
And I've been Anto. You can find my stuff at icarus-games.co.uk. And if you enjoy the show, don't forget to like and follow us all across the internet. Give us those juicy 5-star reviews and check us out on Patreon.
Yeah, do all that stuff. And also, this song playing us out is called... What's it called? It's called All Together by a band called House Hats. I forgot briefly. But thanks so much for listening. This has been No Plan, No Problem.
I'm alright. Hey, we're alright. Hey, all together, alright.